Welcome to the harrowing tale of William Bonin, the Freeway Killer. It was a warm summer evening in June 1979 when 16-year-old Stephen Wood decided to hitchhike home after hanging out with friends in Garden Grove, California. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the streets as Stephen stuck out his thumb, hoping to catch a ride back to his family in Downey. Unfortunately for him, Bonin was cruising the area in his white van, trolling for victims. As Stephen climbed into Bonin's van, he had no reason to suspect that he had just entered a nightmare. The friendly demeanor of his abductor quickly gave way to terror as Bonin overpowered him and bound his hands and feet. As Bonin's van sped away from the streets of Garden Grove, Stephen realized the dire situation he was in. Bonin drove Stephen to a remote location, a secluded area near the San Gabriel Mountains. It was here that the teenager's worst fears were realized. Bound and helpless, he endured unimaginable torture and suffering at the hands of the sadistic serial killer. Bonin's sadistic tendencies were notorious. He enjoyed tormenting and terrorizing his victims before finally ending their lives. As the hours passed, Stephen's pleas for mercy went unanswered. The dark night echoed with his cries for help, but they were heard by no one but Bonin and his partner in crime, Vernon Butts, who participated in many of Bonin's murders. Stephen's ordeal was drawn out, a deliberate act of cruelty that Bonin seemed to relish. When Bonin had satisfied his sick desires, he finally ended Stephen's life, leaving his lifeless body discarded in the desolate wilderness. Stephen Wood's disappearance didn't go unnoticed, and his family launched a frantic search to find him. However, the efforts to locate him were in vain. Months passed, and Stephen's fate remained a mystery until January 1980, when authorities discovered his remains, along with the remains of several other victims, in a shallow grave near the San Gabriel Mountains. The gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the community and led to a massive manhunt for Bonin and Butts. William Bonin's reign of terror came to an end in June 1980 when he was finally apprehended by law enforcement. He and his accomplice, Vernon Butts, were convicted of multiple counts of murder, rape, and other heinous crimes. Bonin was sentenced to death and spent years on death row, while Butts received a life sentence. William George Bonin, born on January 8, 1947 in Willimantic, Connecticut, would eventually become one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. His early life, marked by instability and criminal behavior, foreshadowed the darkness that would consume him in adulthood. Bonin's childhood was troubled. He was raised in a dysfunctional family, often experiencing physical and emotional abuse. He struggled academically and socially, which led to feelings of alienation and frustration. His early brushes with the law began as a teenager, with arrests for truancy and theft. These incidents hinted at the criminal path he would later embark upon. In 1965, at the age of 18, Bonin joined the U.S. Air Force. However, his military career was short-lived. He was discharged just 1 year later due to his involvement in multiple sexual assaults against fellow servicemen. After leaving the military, Bonin's criminal activities escalated. He was arrested multiple times for offenses ranging from drug possession to child molestation. Bonin's most heinous crimes began in the late 1970s. Between 1979 and 1980, he, along with his accomplices, committed a series of abductions, rapes, and murders. His victims were often young men and boys, many of whom were hitchhiking or lured by promises of rides or employment. Bonin's method of operation was brutal. He would torture, rape, and strangle his victims, disposing of their bodies along Southern California freeways and remote areas. The media dubbed him the Freeway Killer due to the locations where many of the bodies were found. Bonin's crimes struck fear into the hearts of the local communities, and his sadistic tendencies shocked even seasoned law enforcement officers. Bonin's reign of terror came to an end in 1980 when he was arrested by the police. In 1982, he was found guilty of 14 murders, although he later confessed to a total of 21. His accomplices, including Vernon Butts, were also convicted for their roles in the crimes. Bonin was sentenced to death. During his time on death row, Bonin showed no remorse for his actions. He became a subject of intense interest for psychologists and criminologists studying serial killers, providing insights into the mind of a remorseless predator. Despite his incarceration, he maintained a disturbing fascination with his crimes, often recounting the details with a chilling lack of emotion. William Bonin, the Freeway Killer, was indeed a deeply disturbing individual are some intriguing and disturbing facts about him. Bonin was convicted of 14 murders, but he confessed to a total of 21. These were not just numbers. Each victim was a real person with a family and friends, making his crimes even more horrifying. Bonin's criminal behavior began early. He had several run-ins with the law during his teenage years, including arrests for truancy and theft. His troubled youth foreshadowed his future as a serial killer. Bonin briefly served in the U.S. Air Force, but was discharged after just 1 year due to multiple sexual assaults against fellow servicemen. His behavior during his time in the military was a sign of things to come. Bonin's murders were marked by extreme cruelty. He didn't just kill his victims, he also subjected them to horrifying torture and sexual abuse before their deaths. His sadistic tendencies shocked even seasoned law enforcement officers. Bonin wasn't always acting alone. He had a few accomplices, including Vernon Butts, who helped him carry out his gruesome crimes. Butts was eventually convicted and received a life sentence. Bonin's crimes earned him the nickname Freeway Killer because many of his victims were dumped along Southern California freeways. This signature mode of disposing of bodies added to the fear and mystique surrounding his crimes. His killing spree was particularly intense between 1979 and 1980. During this period, the number of murders attributed to him escalated rapidly, leading to a state of panic among the local population. Bonin's case attracted the attention of psychologists and criminologists interested in studying the minds of serial killers. His apparent lack of remorse and his willingness to discuss his crimes in detail made him a subject of intense fascination. After years on death row, Bonin was executed on February 23, 1996, at San Quentin State Prison. His execution marked the end of his reign of terror, though the scars left on the victims' families would never fully heal. Throughout his arrest, trial, and incarceration, Bonin remained largely emotionless, even when discussing the gruesome details of his crimes. His lack of remorse and the cold detachment with which he recounted his actions disturbed those who encountered him. William Bonin's life and crimes continue to serve as a chilling reminder of the darkest aspects of human nature and the enduring impact of serial killers on society. On February 23, 1996, Bonin met his end in San Quentin State Prison. He was executed by lethal injection, finally bringing an end to the life of a man who had caused immeasurable pain and suffering to countless families. William Bonin's story serves as a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil within some individuals and the importance of vigilance against the darkness that can lurk in the human psyche. As we conclude our exploration of William Bonin's dark legacy, remember the importance of vigilance against the darkest corners of human nature.